right, Lisa, you want to go ahead and kick us off? Do some introductions?
Sure.
Oh, you know
Um,
what? I think that's me. I put you on the spot, didn't I? Welcome,
yeah,
everyone. We only do this in the spring and the fall, so sometimes we forget what order we're going in. So I'm looking at my notes now on my slides. Welcome, everyone. This is the fall series of our nonprofit management program, and this is our sixth series of the Institute, as we call it. I've already asked you to go ahead and update your Zoom handle. We're delighted to have you with us today. We have some sort of housekeeping instructions here as well that I'll go over real quick. You can raise your hand to be recognized if you have a question as we're covering something. There's also the chat. We love for you to use that to populate questions, as well as maybe you have something you want to share. Maybe you have a resource that's been really helpful for you if somebody asks for something. We want it to be really interactive that way as well. Uh-oh, volume was on and now I can't hear you. Is that Chris? Chris, can you hear us? I can still hear. Chris Lee can hear.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, okay, just making sure. All right. With that, just want to let you know the sessions will be recorded. We encourage you to keep your video on for us. It helps us. I know it really helps Dr. Palmer, our facilitator, to see your faces, see if things are making sense, or if you need to go back, if you have questions, that sort of thing. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Lisa, to introduce Jean, and then Jean will take it from there.
hello all and good morning. And before I get into my spiel, it's going to be very interesting. I'm going to turn it over to Jean Tedrow, our Executive Director, to welcome you to our Nonprofit Management Institute.
Great, thank you, Rebecca and Lisa, and just really am excited to welcome all of you to this fall schedule of our Nonprofit Management Institute. It's just amazing to me. This is probably our third or fourth year of offering the Nonprofit Management Institute. So we're on number 7. And we have always had a very full boat, a full house, maxing out at about 50 participants. So thank you all for joining us. And I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to our sponsors, if you can, our partners and our sponsors for this program, Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, the Guilford Nonprofit Consortium, Duke University Continuing Nonprofit Studies, and the Earl and Catherine Congdon Family Foundation. As a bit of historical context, we founded this program through and with the Guilford Nonprofit Consortium during COVID, especially moving this to a virtual format with the assistance of your facilitator and trainer today, Dr. Pamela Palmer. So I want to also say thank you to her for all of her continued support and work. And of course, to the staff. I'm only going to be staying on for a couple of minutes today, and I will turn you back over to Lisa, and you will be in very good hands. So again, welcome, and thank you for joining our Nonprofit Management Institute.
Thank you, Jean. I appreciate that. So again, good morning and welcome to our virtual interactive North Carolina Nonprofit Management Institute. I'm Lisa Reed, the Chief Learning Officer here at the Center. For those of you that are not familiar with the Center, the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits mission is to educate, connect, and advocate for North Carolina's nonprofits over all 100 counties. So whether you're an emerging or a seasoned nonprofit or a nonprofit leader, we always have valuable member resources at your fingertips. Today and throughout our sessions, we are joined with a great program team at this center here to answer any questions you may have. We have Rebecca Beck, who's our education manager, Leslie Morales, our nonprofit services assistant, and Sarah Easley, who's our events manager, who's doing a lot of work behind the scenes. Hopefully you all received our workbook for this series, and if you have not, please let us know in the chat, and and follow along the best you can, and we'll work on getting you all the materials. If you'd like to learn more about our member benefits and the services that the center provides, please visit our website, and Leslie will go ahead and pop the link and share screen of our homepage so you can see where to go to join for membership if you are not already a member. So thank you, members. And for those of you that are not members, we hope that we get to serve you soon. And so before we dive into our session, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca for some housekeeping items.
Thanks, Lisa. So we've already gone through this screen. It was rotating when you first came in. Pretty much everyone's joined us on time, if not early, so we're good there. Thanks, Scotty. I see your message. I'll make note of that. We'll go to the next screen just to give you all a sense of our partnership with Duke. We've had a partnership since the beginning of the Nonprofit Management Institute with Duke to offer you up to 15 credits that you can transfer from completion of the Institute towards your Duke Nonprofit Management Certificate. Those credit hours are applied to a custom certificate, and those are at $25 per credit hour. And at the end of the series, we'll go ahead and send you a form that you can fill out really quickly, just with your name, organization, email, contact information. And then we send that to Duke, and then Duke goes ahead and sends you the paperwork that you can fill out. We give approval of the credits, and then you can, they'll collect payment from you, and we'll go from there. So you don't need to worry about that now. You just need to worry about attending class and absorbing as much of this content as you can. And then we'll go from there at the end of the series. The next slide, real quick, just a quick conversation about moving from safe spaces to brave spaces. We want all of you to feel comfortable participating and sharing. We want each of you to approach the conversations that we have and the topics that we discuss to seek first to understand and not be understood. So really showing up in a respectful way with one another. And then we all agree to take responsibility to demonstrate that collective commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. On the next slide, we show you our equity statement here at the center, which you're more than welcome to read. We developed this back in 2020, where there was sort of a raised consciousness and awareness. Certainly we were doing work prior to that, but this was where we sort of stuck our sword in the sand and said, this is what we're doing and who's going to join us. And we want you all to be a part of that. So we appreciate you all reading through that. Let us know if you have any questions about that approach, but we're pleased to kind of lead the charge, and we're happy to have you all with us for that. And then I believe I'm going to pass it back to you, Lisa, to go over the agenda.
You sure will. So as you can all see on the screen, the agenda is printed out for the day. You all can see it's a pretty intense topics we have here that we will go through. We will have time breaks throughout. You'll notice it's not listed there, but if you feel free, if you need to go in between, we'll try to plan it in terms of where we will see a good pause to do so. But otherwise, if you have to go, please feel free. So as a reminder, please stay virtual, stay engaged. A lot of information will be thrown at you in the next few sessions. So got your coffee, got your candy, whatever moves you, your pet, whatever it is that helps you stay focused, go get it. And remember, class has now started. So before we get started, well, I mean, we keep saying that, don't we? So let me just say this. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Palmer, and Dr. Palmer's bio, she always tells me don't read her bio, but it's very impressive. So I won't read it, Dr. Palmer. We'll just have it placed into the chat so you can review as we get started. And I guess we're ready to go, Dr. Palmer, or Dr. Palmer or Rebecca, I'm sorry. I think it's Rebecca for participant introductions.
Yep, Leslie has popped Dr. Palmer's bio in there. And we wanted to first start off with just having you all show us where you're located on the screen using the annotate feature. It's kind of fun to see where everybody pops up. So what you want to do is go ahead to the top of your screen, and hopefully if you have the latest version of Zoom and you're all updated, this should come through just fine for you. But you want to go up to the view options at the top. It's a little drop down. You'll click on annotate, and you can go ahead and click your whatever stamp you want to use. We have sometimes people use a heart or a star or a check or X marks the spot, but go ahead and choose your stamp and go ahead and mark here on the map where you're located. And I already see things populating. Make it bigger so I can really see it here. Excellent. Look at that. All throughout the state. Incredible. Yay, good, good, good. Nice, thank you. So we still have a couple people. Yeah, there we go. Nice. There we go. From the mountains to the sea. We're all here. Nice.
It's always interesting to just look at this, like you said, just to see where we're all located. I'm in Gilbert County, by the way, everyone. But yeah.
That's great. All right, I'll go ahead and clear all the drawings. Thanks for participating in that. And we'll go ahead and keep moving along. Dr. Palmer, I will turn it over to you.
All right. Well, good morning. Can we go back to the slide with the map? And if we could, just for just a couple of minutes, you can either put this in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute yourself, feel free to do so. I'm just real interested in knowing why you decided to participate in the Nonprofit Management Institute. Well, let me roll back. Rebecca, there is a question about the annotate feature. Someone is asking, and I don't know about you all, but every time I get on Zoom, I learn something new. And so this may not be new for some of you, but it actually may be the annotate feature. So let's do it one more time and plot where you are. And this is just for the purpose of skill building, right? For those of you who were like, well, now what do I do? And I didn't get to participate and all of that. So Rebecca, I'm going to pass it back to you and let you tell us how to do it.
Yeah, sure thing. So you, when you're looking at your Zoom screen, when you click up to the top, Jamaica, do you see the view options? On my screen, it shows up as a little black bar. And then if I go to the third one down, I see annotate. And when I click on that, I get another toolbar that comes up. And so then I can go across here. I could have text that I want to come up with. I could draw something. I like to use the stamp for this particular annotate activity. But it's a great way for, if you all run things on Zoom, it's a great way to encourage some crowd participation. You can have people type things in if you want to create or generate a list. You'll see later in today's session, we're going to use Mentimeter to do a word cloud. That's another great tool that you can use if you do any online virtual stuff. It's a great way to just get folks to kind of contribute to the conversation other than just the normal chat, raising your hand sort of thing. Okay, Jamaica got it. Nice. Very good.
And I see there are a couple that weren't there before.
Yeah.
So that's real good.
Yeah.
Well, I did not get it. It said it when I click view option, it says fit to window and original size. Or request remote control.
Some versions you may have to just update your Zoom to a newer version. It could be that.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that, Gwen.
And make sure you're not clicking on view, just view, it's a view options.
Yep.
It's more in the middle.
Yeah. Because when you said you saw Zoom ratio and request remote control, you've got you've got your drop down there, but if you don't see annotate, it could just be that you need to restart your Zoom and update. Oh, thanks, Rebby. So you'll see there what it looks like when you do the drop down. And I see folks going ahead and adding into the chat sort of why they're taking this course, what brought them to join us in the Institute. So thank you for doing that as well. All right, Dr. Palmer, can I go ahead and clear these from the annotate?
Yes, I believe so. And while we're doing that, I don't know if we could read off a couple of why people we won't get to all of these, but I don't know, Rebecca, you or Lisa, just kind of randomly kind of see what people are saying. I see a lot of activity in there.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, a lot of good stuff. A lot of new executive directors of direct EDs that have not been in their roles long, wanting to better their nonprofits organizationally and operationalizing it. Some folks are from North Carolina Clean Energy Fund, a startup nonprofit. I've spent years in corporate and academic and public organizations, and I'm eager to learn. New board member for League of Women Voters. A lot of folks are saying they just want to increase their knowledge as they continue to grow in their careers, learn and grow, want to learn about best practices, nonprofit law. I'm just skimming.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, so this is someone coming from state and federal government and first time working with a nonprofit. That's an interesting transition, a good transition. Okay.
Well, thank you all for sharing. It's always good for us to just get a sense of just kind of why folks are here. And it's so awesome that we're coming from all across the state, which is always intriguing to me. I am in Guilford County, and I'm Pamela Palmer, your facilitator for the Nonprofit Management Institute. There will be some staff from the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits who work in roles related to the work that we do that will also be a part of our institute and a part of your experience. The other thing I would say is that there are 4 of us that will be with you the entire time, depending upon what's needed. And so definitely make sure that you ask us questions and inquire with us as you are listening and learning and practicing. You know, there may be some things that we can offer to you or some guidance that we can give. We all have a varied level of experience with nonprofit organizations, and we are very open to trying to support you as we work through all of the material that we are going to work through with the Institute. So now we do have right at 50 participants in the Institute. And so give or take, right? So we'll try to answer all questions. We'll do our very, very best. But if we happen to not be able to get to something that you're interested in, there are some other ways that Rebecca and Leslie are gonna manage that you can circle back to us and get your questions answered. So just wanna kind of let you know that. I do believe at the very, very beginning, Rebecca and Lisa shared with you just kind of the cadence of the Institute. And notice they said it like 2, 3, 4 times. So I'm going to say it a 5th time. And that is that we build on each session. And the other part about this experience, while it's virtual, we have worked diligently to try to make and to offer it in a participatory fashion. So what we always say at the very, very beginning is that it's a little challenging to multitask in this learning experience because we're doing hands-on and we're building upon. we recognize that you are still responsible for all the things related to your role with the nonprofit that you're affiliated with. So by all means, take care of those things. But just know that there are elements of what we do where if you miss a little bit, you might get off a little bit. And so don't get frustrated, just kind of jump right back into what it is we're doing. But we always just want to make sure everyone understands that. I think I saw one person was in Onslow County. I think I saw that on the map. Just as a FYI, I was born in Onslow County. I was born in Jacksonville, North Carolina. So you're not alone. I just saw that one. I think it was a star heart. I can't remember what it was, but I did see that. So I just want to give a shout out to Onslow. Anyway, so we are, you are in for a treat. And I say that because I'm such the nonprofit management geek. And so you are in for a treat over the next 6 sessions that we're going to be working with you. We're going to walk you through what we consider to be just some salient principles related to managing nonprofit organizations. And so as we do that, and the way that we do that is that we have crafted, the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits has crafted a framework for the way in which we try to learn and understand and share and educate and train on nonprofit management. We call this our capacity building framework. And our framework, as you can see, it includes various pieces. We have a principles and practices guide. And Rebecca, everybody got this or a version of this or so?
Yeah, so we included it in the reminder email that went out yesterday for today's session. We included the session 1 workbook, the digital format, electronic version. So you have that just in case your book didn't come or you want to refer to it that way. And we also included a digital version of our principles and practices guide. That being said, the principles and practices guide, the content is within your workbook in the first few pages. So you have it in a couple places, depending on your preference. If you do ever want to order a hard copy, you can email us. You could reply to the wraparound email, for instance, or you could probably not through there, but I'll put my email in the chat if you'd like to go ahead and request a hard copy of the Principles and Practices Guide for an additional fee.
Awesome, thank you. And we will definitely continue to share with you how you can access this. As Rebecca mentioned, our Principles and Practices Guide, the content of that is included in the workbook. And we have specifically 12 principles that we work within. And we also have practices that are listed with each one of those. We also, in terms of how we think about building capacity related to nonprofit management, we hone in on the current condition as it relates to management of a nonprofit. And the other part of our work is that we have a capacity assessment, and we're going to really work within this framework this morning. This is where we're going to spend our time today, is helping us to kind of establish a foundation for the way in which we teach, train, and learn about managing a nonprofit. So there's the Principles and Practices Guide. Then there are 12 principles. There are 3 management conditions, 1 capacity assessment, and 216 practices. Yeah, 216 practices. So our framework involves paying attention to what we consider to be 12 salient functions of managing a nonprofit. In alignment with each of those principles is a set of practices. Those practices are aligned with build, thrive, sustain as it relates to the management condition of a nonprofit. We assess those, we assess our capacity, excuse me, by looking at those. And then by default, we learn about all of the practices related to managing a nonprofit. So that was a mouthful, but we're going to break it up into pieces so that we all can kind of grasp what it is that we're going to be doing. Now, for the Institute, while there are 12 principles in our guide, the Institute will focus on 6 of the 12. So just as a FYI, as we move forward. So here we go. Let's keep going. In the principles and practices guide, so what we have here is we have an image. We've got the cover of the guide. And again, as Rebecca shared, you can acquire this. You have this as a participant in the Institute, but you can get additional guides in a hard copy form and or digital form. And so that's the cover. How to use the guide. So when you open up the guide, you'll see on page, let me get it right, 5, you will see that we have a sample page. So the very first principle is advocacy and civic engagement. And so you'll see the principle is noted at the very top. Below that, we have a primary practice for advocacy and civic engagement. And so for each of the 12 principles, there is a primary practice. The next level is current management condition. And as it relates to this particular principle, we have build, thrive, sustain, and we have unique practices aligned with each of those management conditions. So if you think about it from the perspective of here's my principle, I want to determine and I want to think about how to enhance advocacy and civic engagement, for example. What we're going to be doing is identifying where we are now. So just kind of where we are. And then we're going to be identifying and thinking about how we want to enhance capacity across 6 of the 12. So I just want to pause here for a moment and let you just kind of continue to kind of see this. We also have there as an example, financial management as well. So you've got advocacy and civic engagement built into the guide. And then for each of the principles, you have a separate page in the guide for each one. So again, our framework is 12 principles. We have 3 management conditions. We have a capacity assessment, and we have 216 practices that align with those. So just kind of take a second to just kind of flip through. Again, you might be looking at the digital version of this, or you may be looking at this information in your workbook. We're going to be using the workbook today, so you'll have that. So these 2 pages aren't in your workbook. These 2 pages are in your in the actual guide that you received. And we're going to get to exactly where this info is in your workbook, but if you go to page, and team, make sure that I have the right page. So if you go to page 16 in your workbook, okay, if you go to page 16 in your workbook, you should see principle number 1, advocacy and civic engagement. That's the first principle. So it is the exact same information that you see on the screen here for advocacy and civic engagement. So you've got the principle, you've got the primary practice, and then you have build, thrive, and sustain under each for that particular principle, and their practices to align. Just want to make sure everybody's with us.
Just a quick note, you won't, what you're seeing on the screen, you will not find in your workbook. We took a screenshot of our principles and practices guide to show you what that looks like in there. But all of this content, well, except for how to use this guide, because that's not in here, but it is in the digital copy that you got for the principles and practices guide. Sorry for any confusion.
And what I'm doing right now is I am in the workbook. So all of us should have the workbook, right? I want to make sure, or access to it. And so if you go to page 16, you're going to see principle number 1. If you go to page 17, you're going to see principle number 2. It's the same content, it just from an image perspective, it just looks different, but it's the same information. If you go to page 18, you're going to see principle 3. I'm sorry, 19, you'll see principle 3. Everybody with me? And I'm literally, I've got my workbook, see it? I got my workbook and I'm flipping through the workbook pages. So when you go to page 20, when you go to page 20, it's principle 4. And can we do gallery view real quick? I just want to see faces. Thank you. When you go to page 22, it's principle 5. Everybody with me? I see some thumbs up. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Megan. Everybody with me now? Because the next task that we have to use this. That's why I'm taking time to do this. All right. So you should have all 12 principles, and it ends on page 29 in your book, in your workbook. So it should be strategic planning, and it should be page 29. Yay. All right. Okay. We can go back to the slide. All right. So we have 12 principles. We just walked through those in terms of the pages and where they are in the workbook. And again, these principles are based on our principles and practices booklet. And we've already talked about how we can access that. You can go to the next slide. And the next slide. So one of the ways in which we think about and we try to understand capacity is we look at the current condition of a nonprofit organization. And we look at that and study that related to the build, thrive, and sustain. Team, I'm sorry, go back one. Sorry, I just want to make sure that I'm, okay. All right, we're good. You can go back to the management conditions, yes. So the way in which we look at this is we want to just understand where we are as it relates to our current condition in regards to managing a nonprofit organization. And the way in which we do this is we try to identify where we are as it relates to the management condition and the current condition as it relates to management. So for build, when we look at the build condition, management condition, we are looking to see if the nonprofit meets the legal requirements and that it's operating with the fundamental components of governance and nonprofit management. So that's build. When we look at and try to assess whether or not the current condition is at a thrive level, what we're trying to do here is we're looking to see if the nonprofit is demonstrating a working knowledge of governance and oversight, and we know that aligns with our board, right, and our leadership. And we're looking to see whether we are knowledgeable and have a working knowledge of nonprofit management related to how we handle our day-to-day operations. And so we're looking at staff, we're looking at board, and we're looking to see where we are currently as it relates to a particular principle regarding the management condition. When it comes to sustain, what we're trying to understand is and identify whether or not our nonprofit is capable of sustainability, evidenced by recognition as a community asset, stable revenue streams, operating reserves, robust programs with a track record of good evaluations, and strong governance and respect from peers and constituents that we serve. So we're looking to see whether or not, or where we fall within all of this. I think I saw a question in the chat before, or are you responding, Rebecca? I just keep going? Okay, got it. All right, thanks. So again, I want to just kind of stay right here for just a minute longer, because what we're going to do next has a lot to do with our level of understanding of what we mean here. And so I don't want to move too quickly as it relates to this. But what we do is, again, is we look at each of the principles or management functions, and we're trying to identify just where we are in terms of our current state or the current condition of our nonprofit agency. So those 12 principles that we just kind of flipped through the pages and took a look at, that's what we're doing, is we're looking to see just kind of where we are. And we're going to move into doing an assessment of as it relates to that. Any thoughts about this at this time? Questions, thoughts?
I do have a question. This is Randolph Eaton with Men and Women United for Youth and Families. So does this take into account like the length of time your organization has been in existence? Is there some, thoughts around what that might look like for organizations that's been around from 1 to 5 years versus older organizations that's been around longer?
Good question. And so one of the things that is very, very important to understand is that, to your point, Randolph, is that nonprofits go through what we call life stages, or there are ways to think about the life cycle of a nonprofit organization. And so whenever you are assessing capacity, it is important to take into consideration where your nonprofit is in its life cycle or in those stages. Now, one would think that if we've been in existence for 100 years, that we are at sustain across all those principles. Well, that's not typically how that works. In theory, that would be great, because there are a lot of things that are happening within that nonprofit organization that changes your current management condition at any given point in time. So we may very well be 100 years old, right, as a nonprofit, But we may not necessarily, across all 12 of those management functions, we may not necessarily be at sustain just because we've been in existence for 100 years. And that is because the board changes, the executive director changes, staff changes, funding opportunities change. And so that then impacts our current management condition on any given day. You know, you think about a nonprofit organization that has been getting a steady, has been getting funding from one source for 20 years. And then all of a sudden in year 21, all of that funding goes away. And so where we and how we might assess capacity across these management functions at that point may look very, very different. And so there is no recipe per se that is going to keep a nonprofit organization from fluctuating. It's going to change. It's going to adjust. What we encourage, however, is we encourage nonprofit organizations to assess your capacity on a regular basis, and to keep that in front of your board, and to keep that in front of your staff. If you're doing strategic planning on a regular basis, what we encourage is that you're assessing capacity at that time as well, so that you're strategically planning as it relates to what you have the capacity to do.
Thank you, ma'am.
Rebecca, are there any other, I saw some, I know you're responding to those, so.
Oh, yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
Somebody, Dory had asked how often these should be assessed. I don't know if there's like a should, but it's something that you can go back to if you want to ever get a sense of where you're at, and where, you know, maybe the things that you want to work on. We're going to get into some assessments coming up where you'll get to sort of see where your organization is, and then you'll get to assess from your own leadership perspective what things you want to work on, where you see gaps, or you see things that would really help advance your knowledge and your skill set and your capacity.
Okay. Any other, before we move on, any other just kind of questions or thoughts about the management conditions?
I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I am very new with my organization still. So as far as like assessment goes, when we're doing this assessment, is this something that like we should sit down and do with the ED and the board and kind of all have voices in this? Or is this something that's a little bit more, I guess, objective from an outside perspective versus someone who's been within the organization and knows the ins and outs a little bit more?
The way that we have designed this is that you can utilize any or all of those approaches that you just shared. You as the executive director can do go through the process of assessing capacity for your own kind of thinking and working on how to manage a nonprofit. You could do this with your staff and let them chime in if you'd like. You can do this with your board and let them chime in. So it can be any combination that you deem necessary. I would encourage, and I think the team would agree, I would encourage you to use that 360-degree approach where you're spending some time as the executive director, your staff is, and also the board. And you can bring that information together and kind of tell the story of where everyone is in terms of their perspective related to capacity. So there's no one way to do it. Again, I encourage assessing capacity at the time that you're doing strategic planning. It just makes sense. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. Any other just kind of thoughts about, and we're going to get into some activities here in just a moment. Any thoughts about or questions about the management conditions? Okay. So team, I'm thinking we take a break here, and then when we come back, we're gonna go to slide 14, the 12 principles. We're gonna go to that activity, and then we're gonna work through all of the activities to get some hands-on experience with using the assessment concept.
Great. So what time would you like us to come back, Dr. Palmer?
It's 10:17. I always kind of struggle. You know, I'm a teacher. We just keep going. No, I'm just kidding. Do we want 10 minutes or 5? Do we want 10 or 5? You all tell me.
What if we go somewhere in the middle and we say 10, everybody come back at 10:25?
Sounds good. Thank you, Rebecca.
Okay. No worries. 10:25, we'll see you back here.
Welcome back, everyone. Hope you were able to take a mindless break. Where are my coffee drinkers? I'm a coffee drinker, so I've already had 2 cups. I see your eyes, Lisa. I've already had 2 cups. Well, welcome back. We're going to do some hands-on work now as it relates to our framework. So what we want to do is to help you to better understand the way in which we align managing a nonprofit with our principles and practices. And so we are going to hone in on the principles to kind of get us started. And we're going to use a virtual digital feature called the word cloud. And so, or create a word cloud. And so I'm going to ask you a question, and then I want you to jot down your answers to the questions just on a piece of paper. And then Rebecca is going to tell us how to share the answer that you have crafted for my question. So my question is, what would you say are the top 3 most important functions? What would you say are the top 3 most important functions in which nonprofits manage? Right? I'm going to repeat my question. What would you say are the top 3 most important functions in which nonprofits are responsible for managing? Okay, so that is my question. And I want you to jot down what those top 3 are. Okay. Now that you have those written down, Rebecca is going to share with you how to share your response with us.
Yeah, sure thing. I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the chat here that you can go ahead and click on. There we go. So I'm going to put the link in the chat here. You'll go to this this link and you'll go ahead and enter the 3 management conditions that you came up with into that. And then I'll pull that up in just 1 sec. I have somebody at the door, so I'll be right back.
Yep, management functions. So what you consider to be the top 3 management functions of a nonprofit. Okay. And we're going to give her just a second, and then she's going to come back and help us navigate creating a word cloud. And we'll talk more about that and how we can use that.
Sorry about that. I am back. Let me go ahead and share my screen so we can see things populating, hopefully.
And Rebecca, just kind of tell everybody what they're doing as far as when they get to the link, when they click on the link.
Sure. Yeah, when you click on the link, it should prompt you to enter in up to 3 responses. Hopefully it's allowing everybody to do that. And what it does is it goes ahead and shows our word cloud. Can everyone see this? Our word cloud is updating in real time with everyone's responses. So we can kind of see the words that you see in bigger font will be multiple people have said that same term or indicated that that was one of their answers. So we're seeing it populate here real time, lots of nice colors. We still have folks entering. That's good. Wow. So we'll give it just a few more seconds if people are still entering, learning how to use this tool. All right. We may have a few more that are adding in, but oh, there we go. We see some though that are showing up in that larger font that are ones that are frequently entered. So we definitely see financial management there, strategic planning, board governance, legal compliance, fundraising, programs, advocacy, governance, I see in there. Some of these are similar terms, so fundraising and funding. So we got some finance in there, communication, I like to see that one. I also see some good ones in here like culture and ethics that are a little smaller, but I think they're important to sort of bring up as well.
And so in your workbook on page 8, you have a worksheet titled 12 Principles Worksheet. And so we're doing this in our large group space here. And so in terms of thinking about what we collectively are seeing here is that financial management is our number 1 in terms of the word cloud, in terms of what we see. Looks like Rebecca, strategic planning is coming in maybe second, with board governance being third. That's how it's looking. And I'm noting here as well. So we've got our financial management, we've got strategic planning, we've got board governance. Looks like maybe fundraising and legal compliance is kind of coming up as maybe 4 and 5 as I'm just kind of going through. And let's see, then it looks like maybe finances is competing with fundraising and governance too. Although financial management, okay, I see. We already have that one as number 1. And so I'm at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Number 7, maybe advocacy. If I'm looking at this, advocacy, maybe sustainability. So what I'm doing, group, is I am working through 12. I'm trying to see what our top 12 are as a cohort. And so, and then on page 8, you can craft, you can jot down kind of what I'm sharing if we're all in agreement. So I'm going to start from the top again. Agreed. I think you're right. Programs and fundraising looks like they might be the same size. So it looks like financial management, strategic planning, board governance, legal compliance, fundraising, programs, advocacy, and then they all start to kind of, they're all kind of the same size. So it looks like we might have maybe top 10 in our word cloud here today.
Mhm.
And my goodness, out of 120 responses, this is kind of what bubbled up. Does anybody have any thoughts about what you see before we go on to the next part?
Dr. Palmer, we have, I think, one couple questions. Where might culture and ethics live under the 12 principles? And I'm going to suggest principle number 3 under equity, diversity, inclusion principle. If you, we'll get to that, but if you can take a quick look there, Rebbe, to see it. Hopefully I'm
Yes.
pronouncing your name correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that's the only question that popped up. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Wow, so there's quite a bit of management, right, that takes place in a nonprofit organization. And that is, no matter if we plan it and we're being strategic about it, or if organically things just happen, we know that the work that we do is framed minimally, or at least it's framed around the 12 principles that we're going to be talking about. And so if you go to page 9, so we're going to compare our list that we just created with those 10 to 12. We're going to compare our list to the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits list of primary fundamental principles and the primary practices that go with each one. So on page 9, you'll see principles 1 through 12. These are the principles in which we offer capacity building support. That first principle is advocacy and civic engagement. The second principle is board governance. The third principle is equity, diversity, and inclusion. The fourth principle is financial management. Our fifth principle is fundraising. Our sixth principle is human resources. And Lisa, you want to pick up with number 7? Are you good?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Principle 7 is information technology. 8, legal compliance and transparency. 9, partnerships and collaboration. 10, program design, management, and evaluation. 11, strategic communication, and then we have strategic planning. And Dr. Palmer, would you agree this is in no particular order? It's just our 12 principles, this one thing.
Yes, and I
We
think
can see
Lisa,
that,
there's
yeah.
a question. Was that the question in the chat? It might have been related to what you just said.
I'm also, so
Hmm.
Sarah's saying, I'm also thinking a lot about transparency and how that fits into each of these principles. And then will you also share the 10 principles from our cohort?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
So the 10 from the cohort were financial management, strategic planning, board governance, legal compliance, fundraising, advocacy, sustainability, and then they just began to kind of be the same. So those were, I don't know if that's 10 or not, but
That was 8, so I think we left out programs.
oh, sorry, programs.
We'll
Yeah.
type it into the chat.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 8.
Yeah. So now what we want to do is take a look at what we came up with for the 10, right? And we're comparing and contrasting what we have on page 9. So organically, we asked the question, what are the top 3 most important functions in which nonprofits lead and manage? And of course, we're honing in on management. And out of the 10 that we listed, 10 or so, I do believe all 10 of those show up on our list. Is that right?
8.
8, sorry. I can't count.
After 8, everything goes equal. And the,
And so here is what we know. We know that there are more areas of management, so to speak, than these 12. We know that there are probably, and if you look at the word cloud, yes, there are some elements here that are named differently. But as I look at these at a glance, team, there's not one that sticks out that doesn't align with one of the 12. And I'm just kind of glancing over the whole image here. I see reflective. I'm not so sure that one is blatantly on our principles and practices list on page 9. But I don't see any other. Time management, not so sure that that's on our list. But the others that are listed here, I do believe align with our 12. So, and again, you know, we looked and identified these 12 principles and identified these practices based on what nonprofits around the state inquire with us about at the center. So these principles and practices were defined and explained in the guide per feedback and information that we receive from across the state from organizations like yours. And so, and there could, again, we could probably add some other areas, but it looks like, at least in the imagery here, most of all of this aligns with the 12. Thank you for that. Someone said time management could go under principle number 10. So in terms of that. So if we could go back to the gallery view, we're going to do a little bit more work. We're going to go into some breakouts and just try to do a little bit more work here. I am going to page 10 in the workbook. And again, at the onset, we talked about our approach and we talked about our framework. And this is a page in your workbook that lays all of that out that I shared with you earlier. When you look at page 11, so that is the approach and the framework that we've explained. But if you look pages 11, 12, 13, 14, pages 11 through 14, you will see each of the principles and the primary practice, and you will also see the build, thrive, and sustain option for each one. Now, what's awesome about this is that this is not cookie cutter, right? So for each of the principles, the indicator or the description for build, thrive, and sustain is uniquely aligned with that management function. So when you look at advocacy and civic engagement, build, thrive, and sustain, the way in which we describe it is different than for board governance or equity, diversity, and inclusion if we're looking at page 11. Build, thrive, and sustain is uniquely described for each principle. That's important because remember, a part of our framework is assessing capacity. And so fundamentally, on a very basic level, we assess capacity for each of the principles utilizing the build, thrive, and sustain framework. So I'm gonna give you a minute just to look at that in your workbook. And just kind of go from page 11 to 14. Just take a look at that. For each of the principles, we have aligned management condition across those 3 frames. So just take a look at that before I give us our next instructions. And just kind of look at page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14. That's all 12 of our principles. Where are my folks with highlighters? I'm a highlighter. Where are my highlighter? I see. Yeah, I figured as much. And where are my folks who, I don't want to write in my book. I don't want to write in it. Where am I? Yeah. It's okay. You can do whatever you like. I'm just going to pause for a couple of seconds and just let you kind of read through those. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do some hands-on work with our approach and our framework. And so we're going to go into breakout rooms. You're going to be in a breakout for 10 minutes. And here's what I would like for you to discuss. So here's the question. And I am sure the team is going to put this in the chat. So, but the question that I want you to have a conversation about is, what is the difference of each of these frames? What is the difference in each of these frames? Now, you have two ways that I've oriented us to the use of these frames. The first way is on page 10. And in this approach, or in this way of explaining our frames, we have kind of an overarching description of how we view build, thrive, and sustain, right? So that's the overarching, right? And then when you do go a little deeper, we have uniquely crafted a description for build, thrive, and sustain for each of the principles or each of the management functions. And so when you go into your breakout, what we would like for you to do is to have a conversation about the difference that you see in each of these frames. Also, the usefulness of understanding the management functions of a nonprofit from the perspective of assessing capacity. Okay, that was a mouthful, wasn't it? I know. So again, in your discussion, you're talking about these frames. You're having a discussion about the difference in the frames, the usefulness of the frames. And then we'd like for you, true to form, we'd like for you to have someone that can share back with us. Now, sometimes when we go into breakouts and come back, sometimes we're not always able to hear back from every single group. So we'll do our best because this is an essential part. Understanding our framework is an essential baseline for moving into the other work that we're going to be doing over the next several weeks. So I'm going to let, I think it's going to be Rebecca that's going to put us into breakouts.
Yes, I am. For those of us on the leadership team here, if you get an invite to a group, you can disregard. I'm going to go ahead and set the time limit for the breakout rooms, which I just learned to do in Zoom. It's very exciting. To 10 minutes. And I'll also copy over these questions into the chat for broadcast to your breakout groups. Because once you go into breakout groups, you can't see our main room chat anymore. So I'll go ahead and add those there. You'll get a notice when the rooms are about to close, and you'll have 60 seconds. I'm sorry, I know it just like closes all of a sudden when you might be in the middle of a thought, but also make sure you identify who the person is from your group who's going to report back. It's a highly coveted role, and I know each of you are going to want to do that. So feel free to fight over that role, but make sure you've identified someone that can share back to the group. All right, we'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Thanks, everybody. Let me know if any of you don't see an invite or need to be moved around at all. Everybody's going into their rooms. I'm going to hit pause on the recording.
You were able to do a little bit more thinking about this piece of our framework, and maybe you even were able to kind of grasp from some of your colleagues some ideas about this that maybe I hadn't mentioned up to this point. And so if we could just kind of begin to report back. Rebecca, how many breakouts were there? 5? Oh, okay. All right. So if we can kind of keep it to about 30 to 45 seconds. I'm not even giving us a minute. That's terrible. But we can hear from all 5 if we can kind of be real pointed at what it is that we say. And you can unmute yourself and begin if you'd like.
Hi, I'm Jen. I was with Breakout Group 1. Thank you so much for the great conversation that we started. I think it was really insightful and helpful. We talked about using this as a way to determine where we are as organizations, no matter where we are in our life cycle, and kind of seeing this as building blocks. Like you start with build, and then you move to thrive, and then sustain. And then once you determine where you are within each of the principles, that can give you a focus for 1 or 2 principles you really want to focus on within like the next year or the next strategic planning cycle, so that we're not as overwhelmed as we tend to be with nonprofit work, and that everything has to get done all at once and it's all pressing. And so that led us into the conversation of using this maybe as like a checklist or a survey for our staff and board members to determine where we are and where we need the most growth work.
Thank you. Well, since that was breakout number 1, let's go to breakout number 2.
I don't actually know what breakout group number we were, but I'll go next if that's fine.
Sure.
Now that you said that, I'm like, I have no idea. So our group discussed, rather than kind of specific tasks within our organization, we just discussed kind of the differences in what we saw in the movement throughout these pieces. So we did talk a lot about how it appears that internal strengths kind of grow from left to right when we look at this. And so how we manage from left to right has a lot to do with how we manage each of those 12 principles. We also talked a lot about the constant fluctuation based on any number of things, internally, externally, funding, staffing, things like if we're staying true to diversity and equity and inclusion, how that truly does impact and possibly create a situation where we need to rebuild, but that's a very positive way to rebuild. And so for us, part of that conversation was around looking at sustainability being the goal, but really seeing the building and thriving stage as opportunities to really meet the unique needs of our community.
Thank you, Sarah. Next group.
Hi, I'm Rebby. My pronouns are they, them. I'm with Equality North Carolina and based in Charlotte, and I took some notes for group 3. We talked about the ways that each phase, each frame is unique, can be adapted to be unique to the specific sector or space, and really answers how to keep a nonprofit thriving, and offers that process of how you would like the organization to look, and those can be very different and applied very differently.
Thank you, Rebby.
Hi, this is Stacy. I was with Group 4 and we had a really good discussion. Very similar points that some of the other groups have already mentioned, but we also focused on this is a great reflection of the maturity level of the organization, and provides a really good framework of how to move forward. And this clearly shows, that and you mentioned it yourself, that this is an evolutionary process. And whether it's for funding sources or leadership changes or any other number of things, that you're going to move across the spectrum or across the framework. But for groups, the one of the points that we made is for groups that think they're in high sustain mode across all function, they're going to lose relevancy really fast, because there's no way an organization can stay in sustain forever, right? Because if you're to remain relevant and really meet the needs of your constituencies, your clients, your stakeholders, whomever, you do have to continue to evaluate where you are. You do have to rebuild or build new programs. You do have to secure new funding sources, et cetera. So relevancy and evolution, I think, was a big point, part of the conversation.
Thank you, Stacy. One more group to go.
This is Melissa. Our group did not pick a chairperson, but I'll raise my hand.
I love it. I love it. Shared leadership.
Avoid the awkward silence. So we also talked about the going from left to right as the organization grows, and then some more experienced organizations on the breakout also explained that it's not just linear, and that as the organization reaches different stages where, say, they need a new huge capital campaign for a new huge expansion, suddenly you have to go back to build and figure out how to build again. And so that was I think reflected what we've heard from the other groups. What else did we hear? Anyone else on the group remember this? We had a couple of really good.
We had what someone mentioned, I don't know if that was you, but about the curve and starting with build and moving up to thrive and sustain, but then not letting that upward curve start back downwards. So
right. Yeah, backsliding.
Right? Yeah, backsliding and when you're in sustain.
Okay.
And yeah. And then, we did talk about new things coming up, then you're back in build, or if things change, you're back in build. So you're not always just striving for sustain, because you might end up back in build. Or if someone had mentioned that there's always a build happening, because there's always something new or something changing. That's what it was.
Right. And something we didn't talk about in the group, but in listening to the report outs, to me, this isn't a backslide. There should always be some degree of change, and always, whether it's because you're building a new program or whatever, as you guys have mentioned, but I don't think it's a negative that you move from sustain to thrive or build. It is, yes, it's linear on the page, but maybe it should be a circle. I don't know, instead of left to right, but I wouldn't look at it as a negative, I guess is all I wanted to say.
Agreed. Our nonprofit organizations are, if I could borrow some of the terminology that the 5 or 6 of you shared, we're ever changing. The work that we do, there are some things that remain consistent, right? We can time it every year. For the most part, we might do those things the same way every year. However, there are external factors that might cause a shift in what we do. Let's talk about COVID was one. And now we see EDI and DEI, right, as an element that is expected of us. Lisa, that's a workshop for another day. But we definitely understand and recognize, as we have crafted this framework, we recognize that our nonprofit organizations are going through various stages. And some of what happens to us and with our organizations is that we go back and forth. You know, this week we might be in a highly sustainable mode of working. Something happens, and next week we're building and trying to regroup or hit reset based on what's happening. Now, our marketplace is comprised of 3 sectors: nonprofit, business, and government. And our colleagues in the government sector and the business sector are having these same experiences. You know, they are working and managing within the sectors and within their individual entities from a micro perspective. But at the same time, change is happening there as well. And some of the change that's happening in the other 2 sectors is impacting what we do in the nonprofit sector. I mean, we could go on and on and on and on with this in terms of how what we do, or at least what we're trying to do as it relates to managing our nonprofits in a way where we are successful by our individual nonprofits' definition of success. And so that is very, very different. Now, we've been told more times than not that we should strive, if nothing else, our funders tell us this all the time, you know, so how sustainable are you? And I just laugh at that every time I hear a funder ask that question. But sustainability is this goal that our funders want us to pursue. That our nonprofit organizations are able to function in a way where we have some longevity. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about fundraising. We're going to do a deeper dive into that when we talk about financial management. But sustainability is kind of the goal of sorts as it relates to being an organization that is functioning in a way that it can continue year after year after year after year. So thank you all for all of your feedback in terms of the framework that we offered up, right? And the framework in which we're working as it relates to the Nonprofit Management Institute. The next thing we want to do is we want to do a little practice of assessing capacity. And we want to do this on a very basic level. We're going to utilize pages 11 through 14. So I'm going to have you to go ahead and kind of paperclip that or put a Post-it there. Or I'm talking to all my Office Depot and office supply geeks that have all these little tools that we use to help us to work through an experience like this. So I want you to kind of have that teed up in your workbook. And I also want you to have page 15 kind of teed up in your workbook too. Page 15 is our worksheet. That's what we're going to record some information on. But before we go to that, just make sure you kind of can get to it once I finish making this comment. We've been talking about the nonprofit life cycle. We've been talking about the life stages or the stages of a nonprofit. There is a resource that we want to share with you that you might want to add to your library. And team, if we could go to the link for 5 life stages of a nonprofit organization that's there in the notes on slide, I think it's 15, if I'm right, 15 or 16, I might be off by 1. But if we could kind of share that, and if we could go ahead, can we open that up? Can we click on that and open it up? I want to see if I can get to the image. And that's the cover. So it won't let us go inside. What about this read sample down here at the bottom? Will that do it? Okay. Keep going for me. Keep going, keep going. I'm trying to get to the page that gives the metaphor, the image. This is a resource that I reference quite often. And it's a book titled The 5 Life Stages of a Nonprofit. Yeah, just keep going, trying to get to see. Keep going. Let's see. Is that it? Yep. Keep going. Right there. That's the image I want. Thank you. And if you can make it a little bigger, I don't know if you can. And I'm not going to do a deep dive into this, but this is a resource that I reference, and there are other resources out there to kind of help you to begin to think about kind of the startup of a nonprofit to this kind of sustainability. So in our minds, the build, thrive, and sustain framing is a little compatible with this particular resource. And so there is kind of a stage 1 through stage 5. And then there is this kind of parking lot place that we are hoping we don't have to go there for negative reasons. And that is decline and dissolution, because we know some nonprofits over time may find that dissolution is something they need to do, and or merger. Sometimes nonprofits will merge with other nonprofits. But this particular model of nonprofit organization life stages starts with this kind of imagination and inspiration around why start a nonprofit anyway. So that's kind of the stage 1. And then it kind of works through kind of a stage 2 of establishing or founding and framing the nonprofit. Then the nonprofit moves into kind of growth and being grounded, and then it produces and starts to see sustainability. And then, of course, the stage 5 is about the strategic planning every so often, which is the review and renew. And so you see here, they're using a kite, kind of the building of a kite as an illustration of just kind of the beginning all the way up through stage 5. And so, again, this is a book titled The 5 Life Stages of Nonprofit Organizations. And it's something that I keep on my shelf. And for those of us who still like hard copy books, this is it does come in a paperback form. And also, if you do some Googling of stages and the cycle of nonprofits, you'll see some other resources too that pop up. But this is kind of my go-to. And I wanted to share that with you because it came up several times in our conversation today. And it has come up before where many of us are asking the question, well, I think it was Randolph that asked the question earlier, well, what about the stage of a nonprofit, and what about where it is in its life cycle? How does that impact capacity? And so we can kind of see, we can utilize this as a way to kind of school ourselves on that aspect of what we're talking about. Any thoughts about this resource? Okay, we can go to the gallery view now. We can go back. Hopefully you have been, and I don't want to move too quickly. Did anyone have a thought about that? Okay, well, hopefully it's a resource that you can acquire and that you can kind of add to your, to your library. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to practice using the framework to assess capacity. We're going to do kind of a basic level, and then we're going to do a full-fledged capacity assessment task or activity where we're looking across all of the principles. So if you go to page 15, and I'm going there in my workbook too, you've got a worksheet, and you have a list of all 12 of the principles. And then you have an option to check where your nonprofit is in terms of build, thrive, and sustain. So we're going to identify what best describes your current condition for each of these principles. The pages that we're going to use is page 11 through 14. So I know you got to do a little bit of, maneuvering here. Because you've got it in your workbook. So if you look at page 16, right, that's principle 1, advocacy and civic engagement. And so what we're asking, let me back up. I want to go the other way, sorry. Go back the other way. I don't want to go there. I want to go page 11, sorry. So if you look at page 11, you'll see advocacy and civic engagement, board governance and equity, diversity, inclusion, and then the other principles follow on the pages ahead. So what we're asking you to do using the worksheet on page 15 is for you to note the current capacity or the current condition of your organization as it relates to that principle. Now, I think I saw in the chat, someone asked the question, could you be all 3 of these? Well, now it's an assessment. And so an assessment is a form of a test of sorts. And so we're going to pick one, right? We're going to pick the one current condition or management condition that best fits where your nonprofit is at this particular time. Okay. So I am going to let you work on that. And we will proceed to the next activity after you do that. But you are filling out the basic capacity assessment worksheet. That's what we're doing right now. Is everybody with me? Yes. Good. Hey, Kelly, I saw you somewhere. There you are. Hey. let me know if you need more time. Do we need more time or are we good? I think we're good. So I'm gonna continue on. So hopefully you've had an opportunity to indicate just kind of where you are as an organization in terms of your current management condition on a very foundational level as it relates to build, thrive, and sustain. And Rebecca, we're going to use the poll feature, so I'm going to let you tell us how we're going to go about doing this.
Sure. Hopefully y'all are seeing this poll. What we're asking you to do is to add up how many builds you have, how many thrives, and how many sustains, and to go ahead and complete these 3 questions, indicating in what range of how many of each of these you have, so we can get a good snapshot of what we're looking at. So I'll let you go ahead and do that. If you have any questions, just let me know. I can see how many of you have responded by percentage, so I can know when we can close out. And then I can share the results once everybody's put in their numbers. So it'll give us a nice snapshot. All right, we have about 70% that have participated in the poll. Keep it open for just a few more seconds.
Okay.
Almost 80. And I know some of you, if you missed that last part, or you're on your phone, for instance, it may be harder to participate in a poll. I don't know how that works with Zoom, but I'll keep it open for about 10 more seconds. Raise your hand if you're struggling and you need a little bit more time. There's no shame in that.
There's a question, who else is from Buncombe County? So use a heart if you're from Buncombe County. Somebody's asking. I don't see a heart popping up.
No, I don't.
You got a UNC Asheville alum.
When we did the map, I saw two stars in Buncombe County. One was mine, so I was wondering who else it was.
Oh, okay.
It's me, Catherine.
Ah, okay.
I was under pressure to find that heart, y'all. Stressed me out.
It's funny. All right, let's go ahead and end the poll. We got 86% participation, which in my book is great. So I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share results. So can you all see this now? Okay. So it looks like we had about 53% that said they had between 4 and 6 builds. And then 34% had between 1 and 3. And then we got for thrives, looks like about the same there. We got about 55% for 4 to 6. And then the next up from there would be 24% with 7 to 9 thrives. That's great. And then for our sustains, we had 84% in the 1 to 3 range. And following behind there at 11% for 7 to 9 for sustains. and none that had 10 to 12 I see there in sustains.
That's
Great. Is that helpful, Dr. Palmer, to get a sense of where people, and it's just a snapshot.
Right. Right. Thank you, Rebecca. So just wanted to just kind of give us just a sense of who we are and what we're working on and where we are as a cohort. You know, again, we have 12 fundamental kind of management functions in our principles and practices guide, right? But in the Institute, we're focusing on 6 of those. And so we want to do a deeper dive into assessing our capacity as it relates to those. And so this was just kind of like the warm up, just to kind of get us kind of teed up to do a little bit more of assessing capacity. And let me pause here just to see, are there any questions? Are there any just kind of reflective kind of thoughts that you're having as we move into doing a kind of another level of assessing capacity?
Dr. Palmer, real quick. I'm sorry, Sarah, go ahead. Go ahead. Just a quick question.
I'm muted.
Happens all the time.
I'll go ahead and finish, Sarah. I'm sorry. So if I'm applying for a grant, right, I think I'm more apt to say I'm at more like at sustain than I am thrive. I mean, well, the others. So I'm wondering, would this be useful for organizations as a tool to determine how, I don't know, truthful maybe it is? But just a thought.
So I think where you're going with this, right, is that when we maybe are answering a question in a grant application that's asking us about, let's just say, sustainability. And I think what you might be referring to is how might we utilize this to answer a question like that? I think here's something that's very credible, my opinion. If I'm writing a grant and there's a question about sustainability and I tell the funder that I keep up with my level of capacity and that I monitor and that I track the degree to which I am approaching sustainability or that I am moving in that direction, I think that's a credible response. As opposed to maybe not formally doing an activity or having a part of the way in which I manage not be formal. So there would be the credibility there. It's at your discretion how you explain your level of capacity. For all my academic researchers in the cohort, right? You get the data back, you review it, you analyze it, and then you decide how you want to tell your story as it relates to the data that you receive. So I say be truthful, no doubt, have integrity. But I do think a lot of our funders, especially foundations, are really leaning into capacity these days. And they have listened to some of us, the NC Center being one. They have listened to us in advocating for helping nonprofits enhance our capacity over the years. And now we see where there is more support for that. And some of you may very well be a part of this institute because of that. And so talking about capacity, whereas I think a decade or more ago, we were talking about it and we were sharing it with funders. I think now they've taken action around trying to be supportive. I don't know, team, if anybody else on the team has a thought about that or not, to Randolph's question. But I say, share. I think it's important for our funders to know the good and the challenges that we face.
Dr. Palmer, you have a couple of questions in the chat. Do nonprofits see a trend in certain areas where they tend to not be as strong?
What I would say to that, and Lisa, you chime in, and Rebecca at any point here, I do think program evaluation is one of those areas where we probably could enhance our infrastructure so that we are evaluating our programs and services outside of what the funder wants to know, but that we really have built into our way in which we manage tools to monitor and track and evaluate the impact and the outcomes of programs and services authentically for our nonprofit, and not just what the funder tells us to do. That would be an area. Another area of capacity would be as it relates to donor relations and fundraising and trying to diversify where our dollars are coming from. That's a challenge in and of itself, but I think we should continue to strive for that. We see a lot of our nonprofit organizations who have 50, 60, 70, 80%, 100% of funding coming from grants. And once that opportunity goes away, then the nonprofit goes away. I think that's risky. So that would be the top two areas that come to mind for me. Lisa, I don't know if you have another thought about that.
No, I think you hit it on the head. I think the only one I would probably add that we get a lot of questions about strategic planning is another one, and board governance, just in terms of making sure that they're following protocol with all of the aspects of board governance. Is another area that nonprofits need information on.
Okay. You said there was another question in the chat too. Was there another one? No, just that one. Okay.
I had another thought when going through this. I was just curious, as I was thinking through each of these principles, how people at this same organization might answer these questions differently, and what that means for how we interpret our own work and interpret kind of the sustainability and progress and success of our work from our own perspectives. So I could certainly see the value, in doing it yourself, but also as a team to really speak through, since they're not quantifiable. I mean, they are when you dig down deep, but I thought that was just interesting to think about and how that might change.
And Sarah, I agree with you. So one of the things that we encourage is when a nonprofit is going through the strategic planning process, is that they do assess capacity and that they get the perspective of the executive director, the staff, and the board, because those are three different sets of lenses that the organization would be reviewing and studying capacity. And we encourage that as a step one of strategic planning, because why would we develop a strategic plan that has goals and whatever else in it, and we don't have the capacity to do those things? And sometimes there's a disconnect between what the board thinks we're able to do versus what we as staff know we're able to do. And so to use, Sarah, that 360-degree kind of approach to get the perspective of each of those internal stakeholder groups, well, the ED and then the staff and the board, I think is very important, so that we are developing realistic strategic plans and that we're getting that input at the very, very beginning. Lisa, did you have, I thought I saw you, I thought you had a comment. Okay. But I agree. And a lot of times we skip this part. We skip this capacity assessment part. When we designed the Nonprofit Management Institute, we were very intentional about the very first session being about capacity. Because if you're going to go through a learning experience, trying to understand how to enhance the way in which you manage your nonprofit, why not start with just a foundational orientation to what is it we're managing anyway? And then where are we? And then how do we want to enhance this these particular areas of managing a nonprofit, which leads me into our next activity. In terms of looking at the capacity of our nonprofits from the perspective of, and if we could go to slide, I think it's maybe 18 or 19. It's got the list of the 6. Thank you, team. So here are the areas or the principles that we're going to focus on in this Management Institute. Today is orientation. That's what today is. Today is setting the stage. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to focus on board governance, financial management, fundraising, human resources, program design, management and evaluation, and strategic planning. And we've put the principle there for you. So that's principles 2, 4, 5, 6, 10, and 12. And then we also put the page numbers there for you. And so what we're going to be doing for the next 20 minutes or so, let me check my time here. We're going to, for the next 15, 20 minutes, you're going to be assessing your capacity in these specific areas. And we're going to be looking at all of the practices, right, associated with each one. So let me go ahead and give you an idea of how many practices you're going to be learning about and reading through. Yes, we do. Yeah, I'll do that once I give these instructions. Thanks. Someone's asking for a break thing. They're laughing because the teacher in me just keeps on going. It just, but in terms of assessing capacity, in terms of what we're going to be focused on, for board governance, there are 26 practices. So you're going to be looking at 26. For financial management, there are 21 practices. For fundraising, there are 20 practices. For human resources, there are 20, am I right? I think I'm right, 23 practices, yes. And for program design, management, and evaluation, there are 16 practices. And for strategic planning, there are 19. So I'm just going to give the run through one more time. Board governance, 26, financial management, 21, fundraising, 20, human resources, 23, program design, management, and evaluation, 16, strategic planning, 19. And so we're going to be working through looking at the capacity. So I've got that teed up, and when we get back, I'll give a little bit more instructions on how we're going to assess capacity across all 6 of these. And in addition to that, we will be doing that through a link. It's an electronic survey that you'll be doing this with. So the time right now is 11:44. So if we could, I know this is quick, y'all, but I gotta do it quick. We'll come back at 11:50. That's 6 minutes. So we'll come back at 11:50 and jump right into assessing capacity. We're going to get right to our work. So what we're doing now is we are going to assess capacity of the 6 principles that we highlighted before the break. So if you turn to pages, and you can use your workbook for this. If you turn to page, I think it's 16 is where it starts with the first one. And we put the pages on the screen. Maybe team, we can go back so everybody can see what page they need to mark. Yeah, there we go. So we're, so pages 17 and 18, that's board governance. That's number 2, and I think you can kind of figure it out from there. And then principle 4, so you're utilizing that one. And then also principle 6 and 10 and 12, and we're going to provide a link for you to input your responses. And so you are providing us with the current management condition of your across these 6. Team, I just want to verify, I'm just having one of those moments. We are assessing capacity. Is it what they want to work on in the next year, or we are benchmarking it at what their current level of capacity is? I don't know why that both of those thoughts are in my head right now. And I was looking for it in my notes.
No, it's a good question, because I usually have to remind myself too. The way that the question is posed on our capacity assessment here is select what you'd like to work on in the next year. So so as not to get overwhelmed by all the things that you could do, be looking at the practices within each management condition and be thinking about which ones in the next year is reasonable, realistic for you to accomplish, and are sort of like, this would really help move us ahead. And when you're completing it, if there are none within that management condition that apply to you, you can leave them all blank and move on to the next management condition within that principal area. Does that answer the question? So it's select what you would like to work on in the next year.
Got it. That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
And if you go to the next slide, team, this is, you're doing it for 6 principles. And we're going to provide you with the link here in just a minute. You're going to click on the link, and then you're using your workbook that's right in front of you to help you kind of see what you're marking. And then you're going to enter it into that. Go to the next slide. So here, for example, this is fundraising, and this is one of the areas that you're going to be noting what you want to work on in the next year. So you're honing in on the practices for this. Build, thrive, and sustain are kind of umbrella concepts, but you're going through and you're marking what you want to work on in the next year under the practices. So you're literally going to be clicking on that when you use the survey. The link is in the chat right now. Again, it's titled Practices Capacity Assessment, because we're focusing on the practices. And so again, you're checking the practices, marking the practices that you want to work on in the next year. So just a little bit different way of thinking about and utilizing the framework. Thank you, Rebecca. Teamwork makes the dream work. That's what they say. And I think the team is going to provide us with a little bit of music while we do this. We're going to stay in the gallery. We're going to be paying attention to the chat. So if you have questions, feel free to pose them there. You can, as well as you can unmute yourself and make whatever comment or ask a question as you see fit. But we want to make sure everybody is in the survey. So go ahead and click that link for the practices assessment survey. We're going to be assessing and identifying what we want to work on across 6 of the principles. Make sure everybody.
This is Melissa. Can you put in the chat the list of the principles we're picking from so we know which one, so we can more easily prioritize?
We can do that, and also in the survey that it's only the 6 in the survey.
Oh, okay. So we're going to
Only
answer the
6.
survey for the 6 that are in there. We don't have to prioritize on the fly.
No.
Thank you.
Yep, once you go into that, you can continue, yeah. Just want to make sure everyone is in the survey. Okay, I see some thumbs up, I see some head nods. And the time is 11:56. So probably at about 11:10, team, we'll revisit. Again, we are here. I am paying attention to the chat. If you want to unmute and you have a question, feel free to do so. And the team is gonna provide some background elevator music for us while we do our work.
Leslie, do you want me to provide the music? Oh, she's got it. There you go. Thank you, Leslie. If you need any assistance or any help, just go ahead and raise your hand or unmute at any point.
have about 3 more minutes left. So this is just kind of a 3-minute notification. Hopefully we were able to complete the assessment of what you would like to focus on in the next year. This is going to inform us as to where our focus needs to be in the upcoming sessions related to the practices. Each of you, and Rebecca, I might need to let you explain this part of the process, but each of you will get an individual report back with the information. I think there is
yeah, so we Leslie and I tag team, and we create a PDF of the responses, the things that you checked off under each practice within each management condition. So you'll get a full report sent to you privately to your email. So you'll have that to go on. And then we aggregate and compile top responses from the entire group that we report back on at our next session, so that we can see what were some of the top practices practices within each principle that we want to make sure we cover and address within each of the principles that we cover in the Institute. Yep. I'm happy to see the music is making you happy, Carrie.
We aim to please, no, just kidding. Thank you for that feedback, though. I like music, so I'm glad to know that that was appreciated. So again, as Rebecca shared, each of us, you're gonna get an individual report based on what you submitted today, and then that's our launch, right? That's our launch into our work, so that you can have that top of mind as we're going through each session. And if there are any particular questions or thoughts you have or information you're seeking, et cetera, then you can definitely inquire with us about that as we move through each of our topical areas. And again, keep in mind, we're focusing on the six topics. We are moving into the closing of our session today, but if I could just kind of get a real quick read of just kind of where folks are with our first session. Where are you? Right now you're thinking what? Right now you're feeling what? You can either put it in the chat or you can unmute
Use
yourself.
your emojis.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you can use your emojis, your reaction feature as well on Zoom.
Uh-oh, I can see some hearts.
Ah, thumbs up.
Thumbs ups. Be honest, it's okay if you can do a sideways thumb if you're not sure. Someone has a prayer hands. I like that. That's what Megan put up. That's a good one. Oh, we're seeing some in the chat too. Okay, dots are connecting.
Yeah.
Good. Yep, we know it's a lot to take in. And we're just getting started. The plane has just started down the runway. Taking off. We haven't started to ascend yet. By the next session, we'll be ascending there. Speaking of the next, what did Melissa say? Feeling daunted about digging out from deadlines in order to be able to focus on the foundational work. Yeah. Where I want to make a greater influence.
Uh-oh.
I think Randolph is screaming, I think, or he has an open mouth emoji. For good. This is great. So as you all, as we get ready to close, as you can see on the slide, we're definitely going to send out a post-evaluation follow-up. Please take a few minutes to fill that out. We greatly appreciate it. Again, each of these surveys help us to improve on the next session and the next series of the Institute. The upcoming next session will be board governance. Again, another heavily weighted session. But I think you all take value from it. So we hope to see you all next week on Wednesday with plenty of coffee and all those sugary treats. And I haven't seen any animals yet. Have you, Dr. Palmer? In last session, we saw quite a few guests bring their participants bring their animals as guests because it was their comfort item. So if there aren't any other questions, we're going to give you a few minutes back in your day. And I'll wait a few minutes to see if there's any questions. Rebecca, I think you addressed this already about the copy of the submitted survey. I don't want to repeat if you've already said something.
Yeah, yep. We'll be sending you an email. Our goal is to have it by the end of this week with your personal answers to the survey. So if you started and you didn't have enough time to finish, please take this extra time we're giving you to make sure you finish and submit. And yes, our next class is on Tuesday.
Yes, Tuesday. Sorry. See about that I didn't have that second cup of coffee, nor did I have my animal around, so that made it. Well, thank you all. If there are any more questions, we'll see you next Tuesday. Have a great day.
Thanks all.
And if you have any lingering questions, we'll be on for a few more minutes if someone wanted to ask us a question. We call it the parking lot. We're parked here for a minute.